Good evening. I'm Nima and this is Forum Daily for Wednesday, June 22nd. And tonight, skyrocketing inflation reaches new records as Canada experiences an almost 50% year-over-year jump in gas prices. This fueled the largest rise in the annual inflation rate in 4 decades last month. The Consumer Price Index in May rose 7.7% compared with a year ago, which is its largest increase since January 1983. The pain at the pumps is the result of high crude oil prices caused by supply bottlenecks, which is due to Russia's invasion of Ukraine and a leap in demand prompted by eased COVID-19 restrictions. Gas prices jumped 12% between April and May, which is the largest one-month price increase since January 2003. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau arrived in Rwanda today, beginning a 10-day, 3-country trip. Mr. Trudeau's first stop in Kigali will be to meet with the heads of the Commonwealth's other 53 nations. Next up will be a trip to Germany for the G7 summit, and then on to Madrid for a summit of NATO leaders. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky is expected to virtually address both the G7 and NATO summits. The Ukrainian president also virtually addressed an in-person audience at the University of Toronto today. Mr. Zelensky says Ukraine needs more weapons, financial support, humanitarian aid, and permanent sanctions on Russia. He says students can go to rallies and use social media accounts and communication with their friends to remind people of the tragedies that are happening in Ukraine. This comes nearly 4 months after Russia's invasion of the country began. Students from 10 other universities across Canada took part virtually. Well, it looks like Ottawa is set to lose money over its controversial Trans Mountain pipeline. The parliamentary budget officer says the pipeline is worth $1.2 billion less than it was in December of 2020. Not only is it worth less, it's also continuing to run behind schedule, with the completion date being pushed back a year to the end of next year. The PBO says if the government were to stop construction this month and cancel the project indefinitely, it would need to write off over $14 billion in assets. Meanwhile, Canadians can prepare for a second price hike for milk. In a rare move, the Canadian Dairy Commission has approved a second milk price increase this year. The Crown Corporation, which oversees Canada's dairy supply management system, says farm-gate milk prices will go up about 2 cents per litre or 2.5% in September 1st. The increase comes after milk prices rose 6 cents per litre or 8.4% on February 1st. Dairy Farmers of Canada asked last month for a mid-year milk price hike due to high inflation. Some good news for airline passengers. Very soon, they'll have more rights when it comes to refunds. Starting early September, airlines will either have to refund passengers or rebook them if a flight is canceled or significantly delayed. It's part of the new regulations that the Canadian Transport Agency announced to beef up its passenger rights charter. Thousands of Canadians have faced a slew of problems as airlines and security and customs agencies struggle to handle staffing shortages. This comes as travel ramps up after the COVID-19 pandemic. Moving to Quebec now, where Premier François Legault toured the L'Abbaye district in Saguenay this morning. This comes following the evacuation of nearly 200 residents due to the threat of landslides. The premier said that 5 homes must be demolished and another 4 might need to come down. Almost 200 people were forced from their homes over the weekend because of the unstable earth. Mr. Legault says the province will increase payments to them. Well, it's wedding season, and a study of almost 20,000 couples found that the average Canadian wedding cost is about $29,450 in 2018. And this is not counting honeymoons, rings, and other jewelry. The study was conducted by The Knot, Wedding Wire, and Bodas.net. Ottawa-based planner Shannon Kennedy is advising clients to budget at least 30% more than usual this year. She says 2022 is forecast to have the largest number of weddings worldwide because of all the couples who postponed ceremonies in 2020 and 2021, as well as couples who always intended to get married this year. The federal government is freezing Hockey Canada's federal funding. This over their handling of an alleged sexual assault by members of the 2018 World Junior Hockey team. Minister of Sport Pascal Saint-Onge says the national sport body will only have its funding restored once it discloses the recommendations of improvement provided by a third-party law firm hired to investigate the incident. Up next, a look at how to stay safe in the sun this summer. We'll be speaking with Dr. Abhishek Raut in Forum Daily's weekly medical segment. Stay tuned. We'll be right back after a short break. After over 2 years of pandemic-related disruptions, Canadians are ready to have some fun in the sun this summer season. However, some experts warn that too much fun under powerful UV rays can lead to dangerous health issues. A new study published in Frontiers in Medicine warns of rising rates of melanoma in Canada. And what's interesting is that those living in southern and coastal areas are most at risk of developing this deadly form of skin cancer, according to the study led by McGill University. Well, joining us now to tell us more about this research in our weekly medical segment is Dr. Abhishek Raut, Medical Director at Appletree Medical Group. Dr. Raut, welcome back to Forum Daily.
Great to be here.
Now, after 2 long years of COVID-19 concerns, why should Canadians consider protecting themselves from skin cancer in particular, Dr. Raut?
Well, it's interesting. Melanoma, or skin cancer in general, is much more common than we think. It's actually more common than all the other cancers combined. So there are about 80,000 skin cancer diagnoses in Canada per year. 8,000 of these are melanomas. And so what's concerning about that is that incidence of melanoma is really going up. In the early 2000s, it was about 12 cases per 100,000. But now the national average is closer to 20 cases per 100,000. So another way to really look at that is every 66 minutes, someone gets diagnosed with melanoma.
That's a concerning rate of melanoma, Dr. Raut. Now, why are those living in southern and coastal areas more at risk?
We've had previous research that really has suggested that there's been ozone depletion as a result of climate change. That may certainly play a factor in melanoma diagnosis. Now, that's really been well established, but we know that there are other factors that are coming into play as well. More affordable travel to sun destinations, longer life expectancy, so that gives people more time under the sun, and more time to develop cancer are a lot of these contributing factors, especially for those of us more in the south.
And taking a look at melanoma in particular, we know the study looked at melanoma. So what do we know so far about this condition?
All right, so melanoma can be hard to detect in the early stages because it has no visible signs, but there are changes that can occur over time. In medicine, we call them the ABCDEs of melanoma. So A is for asymmetry, you're looking for molds or growths with an odd shape. B is for border, so uneven or notched borders. C is for color, looking for moles with different colors or getting darker over time. D is for diameter, so moles that are larger than 1/4 inch in diameter. And E is evolution, so looking for changes in time. So the idea is if you see these changes in the ABCDEs, they are suspicious and you should contact your doctor for a check.
And what other health risks do UV rays from the sun pose, Dr. Raut?
Right, so we've talked a bit about skin cancer in general. There's also premature aging and other skin damage. So chronic exposure to the sun causes premature aging signs. The skin can become thick, wrinkled, and leathery. In fact, what's interesting is 90% of visible skin changes that we attribute to aging are actually caused by the sun. We also have cataracts that can certainly cause a loss of transparency in the lens of the eye clouding, which causes issues with vision, of course. And then finally, the immune system. We know that the skin can mount a strong defense against foreign invaders, cancers, and infections, but overexposure to that UV radiation can weaken the immune system. It can reduce the skin's ability to protect against these invaders.
All right, Doctor, a little over a minute left here, so let's talk solutions. What kind of steps can Canadians take to protect themselves from such skin diseases?
So I think applying sunscreen is quite helpful with doing any outdoor activities. That's the first thing we should recommend. Common places people would miss when applying sunscreen include the ears, the scalp, the chest, the lips, and the eyelids, and the top of the feet. So that's a very important part here.
And what about the strength of SPF? We have SPF 50, 60, even SPF 100. So should people consider wearing the highest level SPF when outside?
Yes, that's interesting. What we found is there are so many types of SPF, but really the SPF that works well is around 50. The rest are just minuscule differences there. And the idea is to keep reapplying every 2 to 3 hours.
All right, Dr. Raut, a quick 30 seconds left here, but any last messages for our summer-hungry viewers looking to get out and enjoy this season?
Look, we know with school is almost out, the warm weather is beckoning, soaking in the sun is going to be high on a lot of people's list of summer activities. Enjoy yourself. Don't sit at home. Enjoy the outdoors as much as possible, but try not to get a tan.
All right, Dr. Raut, always great having you on Forum Daily. We'll see you again next week.
Take care.
Coming up after the break, we take a look at a new report from the UN's Global Fund for Education in Emergencies and Protracted Crises. We'll be speaking to Yasmine, Sherif, the Director of Education Cannot Wait. We're going to take a look at the growing number of crisis-impacted children that are requiring educational support, how funding has worsened since the pandemic, and how ECW's resource mobilization campaign is responding to this crisis. A very interesting and important interview coming up next, so stay tuned. We'll be right back. The United Nations Global Fund for Education in Emergencies and Protracted Crises released a shocking report this week. The fund, also known as Education Cannot Wait, says the number of crisis-impacted school-aged children requiring educational support has grown. This from an estimated 75 million in 2016 to 222 million today. These alarming new figures are released against the backdrop of a recent ECW study, which shows that the response to education in emergencies and crises remains underfunded. And this has worsened since the COVID-19 pandemic. To respond to this global education crisis, ECW and strategic partners have launched the hashtag 222 Million Dreams campaign. Well, joining us now to unpack the situation and this campaign is Ms. Yasmine, Sherif, the director of ECW, joining us from Geneva, Switzerland. Ma'am, welcome to Forum Daily.
Thank you very much.
So let's start with a brief overview of the findings of this recent study.
Well, when Education Cannot Wait, which is the United Nations Global Fund for Education, Emergency and Protracted Crisis, was established at the World Humanitarian Summit in 2016, the estimated number of children and youth, half of them girls, stood at 75 million. And today, just over 6 years later, we have found through our methodology and research that the actual figure is 222 million children and youth, half of them girls. Of those, 78.2, that's 35%, they are completely out of school. 119.6, that's 54%, they're in school, they go to school, but there's no learning. They basically sit by a desk. No school books, no school feeding, there is no mental health services, they're simply not learning. And then a smaller percentage of 11%, 24.2 million, yes, they attend primary school and secondary school. They have some proficiency in literacy skills and math, but they lack psychosocial services, school feeding, water and sanitation, and many other factors that are so critically important for a child or a youth to learn.
Some really heartbreaking numbers there, ma'am. Now, which countries and regions are most affected?
Well, let's start. The worst affected are sub-Saharan Africa. And here we speak Sahel, the Sahel, Mali, Central African Republic, Chad, the Democratic Republic of Congo, South Sudan, Sudan. The sub-Saharan Africa and the Sahel are the worst off. Then we have across the Middle East, refugees from Syria. We have Iraq, Palestine refugees, Yemen, and then refugees from Venezuela, going to Colombia, Peru, Ecuador, and not the least in Asia, we have the Rohingya refugees, and then we have the children and the youth of Afghanistan. And as we saw today, it was an earthquake, but put that aside, they have suffered since 1979. It's a protracted crisis, the earthquake, and now secondary school girls have been banned to actually attend school, together with extreme poverty and the wars that have been going on for decades. There's massive human suffering for young people out there.
Some really, really shocking information there, ma'am. About a minute and a half left here, but what sorts of education supports do these children need?
Well, it's the same that you and I had when we went to school, or all children and youth in Canada need, and all over the world. They need trained teachers, teachers who are skilled to deal with the traumas, because all of them are traumatized from conflict, climate-induced disasters, as refugees. So they need trauma counseling, they need good curriculums, well-trained teachers, school feeding, water and sanitation, health services, all that we benefited from. They have nothing, and there are 222 million of them. Education cannot wait. We are convening a high-level financing conference in Geneva, hosted by the Swiss government in 2023, together with Germany, Norway, South Sudan, and Niger. And we really hope to mobilize Canadian support. We know the great solidarity amongst Canadian people and around the globe, private sector and the government. Please help us to help them make the dreams come true.
And for our Canadian viewers watching this right now, check out hashtag 222 million dreams for more information. Ms. Sherif, thank you again for joining us today on Forum Daily.
Thank you very much for having me. Thank you.
We'll be right back. In a rare move, the Taliban supreme leader has called for international help for Afghans affected by this morning's powerful 6.1 magnitude earthquake. The disaster has killed at least 1,000 people, and it comes at a time when the country is already deep in one of the world's worst humanitarian crises. Millions are facing increasing hunger and poverty after the cutoff of international financing to the ruling Taliban. But the Italian medical aid group Emergency says it has sent 7 ambulances and staff to the areas closest to the quake zone. And Pakistan also says it will help. Meanwhile, in southern China, major flooding has forced the evacuation of tens of thousands of people. Guangdong province suspended classes, office work, and public transport as rising waters and the threat of landslides continued. In a neighboring province, almost 500,000 people are homeless or displaced. The heavy rainfall has collapsed roads in some parts of cities and swept away houses, cars, and crops. Financial troubles continue to erode Sri Lanka's debt-laden economy, which the Prime Minister says has collapsed. This comes after months of shortages of food, fuel, and electricity. The Prime Minister underscored the country's dire situation in recent comments as it seeks to have help from international lenders. He told Parliament the South Asian country is facing a far more serious situation beyond shortages of necessities. The country is negotiating with the International Monetary Fund on a bailout with a preliminary agreement expected next month. The inflation rate in the United Kingdom hit 9.1% in May. That is a new 40-year high thanks to continued food price hikes and record-high gas prices. The increase was in line with analysts' expectations, and it signals no quick end to the cost of living squeeze facing millions in the UK. The Bank of England says inflation could hit 11% in October when a cap on domestic energy bills is lifted. This comes as the U.S. continues to tackle inflation with interest rate hikes. The head of the Federal Reserve says the U.S. Central Bank is committed to raising interest rates high enough to slow inflation. Jerome Powell says the pace of future rate hikes will depend on whether and how quickly inflation starts to decline. Some economists fear that the Fed's aggressive rate hikes could tip the U.S. economy into recession. Back in China, the president says Russia's war in Ukraine has sounded an alarm for humanity. But Xi Jinping continues to take a neutral position, offering no solutions and refusing to refer to the war as an invasion. He spoke at a virtual business forum with the leaders of Brazil, Russia, India, and South Africa. There, he condemned Western sanctions against Moscow. He said the sanctions could act as a boomerang and a double-edged sword. Moving to Israel now, where lawmakers voted on Wednesday in favor of dissolving parliament in a preliminary vote. That sets the wheels in motion to send the country to its fifth national election in just over 3 years. The motion was the first step in a series of votes before the formal dissolution. It came 2 days after Prime Minister Naftali Bennett announced that he was disbanding his unraveling governing coalition, just over a year after he took office. The press freedom group Reporters Without Borders is sounding the alarm on Russia's actions in Ukraine. It believes a Ukrainian photojournalist and a soldier who was accompanying him were coldly executed. They say it occurred in Russian-occupied woodlands in the first weeks of Russia's invasion. The bodies of Max Levin and serviceman Alexei Chernyshov were found April 1st in woods north of the capital Kyiv. Reporters Without Borders said it went back to the woods to investigate the circumstances of their deaths, and they found 14 bullet holes in the burnt hulk of their car. Well, amid rapidly rising gas prices around the world, there's at least one person bucking the trend. A man in Phoenix, Arizona, loses hundreds of dollars a day by selling gas 50 cents cheaper than what he pays for it. In March, Yasmine Singh paddled 10 cents under market price for gasoline. But as inflation, sanctions against Russia, and other factors caused gas prices to skyrocket, Mr. Singh would not be deterred. He and his wife are working longer hours in their store next to the pumps, trying to make up the difference of losing $500 each day. But this fact doesn't bother them. Back in 2007, Mr. Singh's initial reason for buying the gas station was in order to lower prices for his customers during the recession. All right, I'm Nima Rajan, and that'll do it for your look at national and international news for today. Remember, for more news on demand, you could always visit our website, and make sure to follow us on our social media handles on Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter. Take care, Canada. We'll see you next time on Forum Daily.